And now I have the pleasure to introduce Nextdoor Solutions to Domestic Violence. Nextdoor Solutions is the only standalone domestic violence agency in Santa Clara County, answering approximately 15,000 crisis calls and serving an average of 3,000 survivors of domestic violence annually. Their comprehensive, compassionate, bilingual services are available free of charge to all women, men, LGBTQ+, and individuals across the gender spectrum and of varying abilities. Afi is a Nextdoor solution volunteer and community engagement coordinator, and Reza is their development coordinator. Tonight, they will be talking about what domestic violence is, the impact it has, the services they offer, and how we can give back.
Oh. Hi, everybody. I already kind of introduced myself earlier, but my name is Afi. I am the volunteer and community engagement coordinator with Nextdoor Solutions. So I do our volunteer program and our community outreach.
Hello, my name is Reza Alam. I am the development coordinator at Nextdoor Solutions to Domestic Violence. I help bring in the funds. What that looks like is fundraising, um, getting people involved in the community, and doing presentations. So, okay. So, a little bit about Nextdoor Solutions to Domestic Violence. We've been around for over 50 years. We are the only Nextdoor Solutions. We only have one office, and that is in San Jose. And we serve everyone, no matter the race, the socioeconomic status, anything. And we are a nonprofit organization, so all our services are free to survivors, and we are the first bilingual DV agency in California, actually. Yeah. And we started in a garage, but then unfortunately services expanded because the need has increased. So that's why we are in office space now. And our mission is to end domestic violence in the moment and for all time. We strive to meet that mission every day. I, for one, am very proud to be a part of this organization because I see that we're very survivor centered. Everything that we do just goes directly to the folks that we try to serve and help.
So what is domestic violence? Domestic violence can be known as many things: intimate partner violence, spousal abuse, dating violence, date rape, or battering. Folks who cause harm, they use force to inflict emotional, psychological, or physical injury. They try to seek power over a spouse, intimate partner, or girlfriend or boyfriend. And they can come in every demographic, age, ethnicity, gender, religion, level of education, and socioeconomic status. So an abuser does not look like one type of person. Next slide, please. The legal definition of abuse kind of looks the same, but we're just going to go over it. Domestic violence is an ongoing pattern of intimidation, violence, controlling and or terrorizing behaviors by one person over another in order to control and or have power over another person. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, regardless of age, race, sexual orientation, educational attainment, or socioeconomic status. And it is important to note that domestic violence is a targeted incident, not an isolated incident. And I like to give this example. Someone who has a disagreement with a coworker has the discernment not to put their hands on their coworker, but when they come home, they might not have that same discernment with their spouse or their partner. So it's really about it being a targeted incident and it being something that they can control, but they choose not to. The different types of abuse, oftentimes we think of physical abuse as the main one we hear about, but there's so many different types of abuse that are considered under the realm of domestic violence. Physical abuse can look like control through acts of violence or restraint. Sexual abuse and reproductive coercion are two separate things. Sexual abuse is control through sexual assault or rape. Reproductive coercion is control by denying a survivor control over their own reproduction. Like messing up a condom or sabotaging someone's birth control regimen. Verbal and emotional abuse, which oftentimes can leave longer scars than the physical abuse. Control through put downs, humiliation, name calling, and mind games. There's economic and financial abuse, controlling a survivor through their access to money. There's stalking and harassment, which is more common and more accessible in these day and age with smartphones and with technology. Following a survivor, checking the mileage on their car, tracking their smartphone, or monitoring their calls. And then spiritual abuse is one as well, controlling a survivor by denying them their ability to attend the religious services or forcing them to break their tenets. Next slide, please. So there's many also other types of abuse. Isolation is something that we saw come up a lot more during the pandemic. People were kind of stuck at home with their abusers and sheltering in place with their abusers. And so that is control through preventing someone from seeing their family, their friends, or limiting their social safety net. Sexual identity, controlling by threatening to out a survivor to their family or friends if that's not their choice in that moment. Using children, by controlling a victim by harming or threatening to harm children or taking the children away, or using the children as ploys during child custody agreements. And then coercion and threats, control through coercion into doing things against the survivor's will or threatening to harm them if they don't comply. Next slide. So we're going to go into the scope of the problem and why we do what we do. Some statistics. The single largest cause of injury to women ages 15 to 44 years old is domestic violence. 1 in 10 high school students has been purposefully hit, slapped, or physically hurt by their boyfriend or girlfriend. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. Over 15 million children in the United States are exposed to domestic violence and suffer short and long-term negative effects, which I'll talk more about a little bit later. And then despite a growing awareness of transgender people and rights in the United States, transgender people still face disproportionate rates of domestic violence and sexual violence as compared with cisgendered individuals. Black and what was it? Black, Indigenous people of color, women have higher numbers of domestic violence, not due to race, but due to lack of services and underlying root causes of gender-based violence. Some more statistics. 1 in 4 heterosexual lesbian women and over 1 in 2 of bisexual women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. Nearly 1 in 2 female murder victims and 1 in 20 male murder victims are killed by a former or current intimate partner. 1 in 10 men have been severely physically abused by an intimate partner. 1 in 3 adolescents will experience violence in their dating relationships. Over 90% of abusive relationships involve financial abuse, forcing many to choose between homelessness and abuse. In the United States, an average of 20 people are physically abused by an intimate partner every minute. Women who reported instances of domestic violence had a 60 to 92% prevalence of obtaining a traumatic brain injury related to the abuse. And a woman's greatest risk of lethality is 6 months before she leaves her abuser and 6 months after she leaves, when control is lost. So just going over the impact of domestic violence on children, because we find and studies have found that the younger the children are and the type of exposure that there is, the longer and long lasting effects and the more intense effects that will be experienced by the child. So many children exposed to violence in their home are also victims of physical abuse as well. And then children who witness domestic violence or are victims of abuse themselves are at serious risk for long-term physical and mental health problems. 15.5 million United States children live in families where at least intimate partner violence has occurred in the last year, and 7 million children live in families in which intimate partner violence occurs in the past year, I think. So children can observe the violence by seeing the physical harassment, verbal interrogation, throwing objects. They can see the threats. They can see rape happen, unfortunately. They can hear it. They can listen from other parts of the residence, outside, on the phone. When they try to stop the violence, they can be abused, remain in the line of fire when they try to defend their parent or a partner or sibling. And they can experience the aftermath, like having to go to a shelter, having to go to the hospital for their parents' medical needs, visiting a parent in prison, in jail. We have sheltering, and so we understand firsthand how that can impact the children, how they're uprooted from their comfort zone, from their rooms, their friends, and how hard that can be on them. And we don't want to lessen that. Kids can also be used as a tool by the abuser when the child is either being beaten or threatened while in the mother's arms, or taken as a hostage, or again used as a ploy in child custody battles. Next slide, please. So how many of us know what ACEs are? Have heard about it? So yeah, ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. So pretty much children exposed to domestic violence, neglect, and abuse face increased risk of adverse childhood experiences, and that can impact them long term, have long term emotional, behavioral, and health issues affecting their development and overall well being. So what impact can ACEs have? ACEs can have an impact on someone's behavior in the ways of maybe them lacking physical activity, smoking more, substance abuse, missing work, or not being able to maintain schedules or reliability. So it's behavioral things that we see when, in terms of children when they age up, when they grow up, how neglect, abuse, and domestic violence affects them. We also see that a growing child's behavior and their life choices and their overall health outcomes are affected as well. Some people can experience severe obesity, diabetes, depression, stroke, cancer, heart disease, to name a few. Next slide, please. So there are some things that we don't want to say when we come into contact with someone who's experiencing domestic violence. Believe me, I'm going to go over ways on how to refer out to us and things that you can say, but these are things that you should probably stay away from saying. You should call the police. It takes away their choice, and we don't want to give advice here. We like to give people options and educate them on what's happening, on what domestic violence looks like. But we also don't want to give advice or tell them what to do. It's their choice. You're definitely in an abusive relationship. That or that doesn't sound like rape to me. That defines their experience, and we don't want to do that. We let a survivor explain to us what has happened to them. Your partner is crazy, you need to break up with them. Telling them what to do or labeling their partner as crazy is not necessarily the best approach. Oftentimes people have complex long-term relationships and reliability with their partners and love their partners. So to talk negatively on someone doesn't necessarily win good brownie points with you and with, so also, what did you do to set them off? That's victim blaming. That places the blame on the survivor, and we don't want to do that. What happened after that and after that? That's kind of just prying and just asking a little bit too much in detail that not necessarily they don't need to share or might not feel comfortable sharing. We allow them to come out and say what they want to, how they want to. Next slide, please. So how do I make a referral to Nextdoor Solutions? There can be different ways you can make a referral. You can make a warm referral and say, hey, like I've heard of these services, and I have a colleague who works at this awesome organization. Here's her card. Feel free. I'm giving this out to other people in my community. Feel free to, utilize it so as to not single someone out and to give them a direct referral to someone they might know. I have my card here, so I'll leave that here as well. And we also have handouts with our crisis hotline number and all of those types of things for referrals. And then just explaining a little bit about what advocacy looks like, because that's a big part of our work at Nextdoor. The definition of advocacy is to do something for someone that they cannot do, they cannot for whatever reason do for themselves. So to act on behalf of someone else when they are unable to act for themselves. And so that's what we like to look at, how we address DV. We have trained advocates at our center, and they are ready for survivors all the time, 24/7, whether it's a crisis hotline call or a walk-in. They're ready to kind of help them and figure out what's the best step for them at the point that they're at right then. Next slide, please. So what can I say? Here's some things you can say. I'm worried about your safety. I'm concerned about your safety of your children. I'm here for you so they can have support and know that they're not alone. You deserve better than this. There are service providers that can help. And also handing out pamphlets or just saying, hey, I'm handing these pamphlets out to all of my community members doesn't really single one person out. It kind of generalizes your actions. It says, hey, this is not specifically aimed at you. I don't know what's going on in your life, but here's a handout. And that really does kind of extend the our resources out to people. Next slide. So our program and services, we provide 24/7 crisis hotline, 24/7 crisis hotline answers and calls. We take the Santa Clara Adult Protective Services crisis hotline after hours as well. That's directed to our hotline. We also have walk-in crisis intervention services, like I said, advocacy. So we have advocates there ready 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, ready for any scenario that's kind of thrown our way. We also have legal advocacy. So we have people who are familiar with the courts, with lawyers, with DAs, with judges, and they can kind of help survivors navigate the legal system, which can be stressful and daunting and thrown upon people without choice. So we also have self-sufficiency group because we want to make sure that survivors feel supported, whether it's in a support healing group and just talking to other people who have experienced the same kind of thing, or whether that's computer literacy group and job searching and resume building so that they can find some independence and feel empowered on their own. That's something that we do. We also have emergency sheltering for women and children. We have about 19 beds in our shelter. So it's not huge, but we do hoteling if we run out of space. And again, we have 15 different support groups, like I mentioned, but they are in Spanish and in English. We have the only all-male support group in all of California for domestic violence, and it's virtual, which is super impactful. The men who go to this group are amazing, and you find so many amazing stories from them. It's really moving. And we also have one for all women in English, Spanish, for teens, and for LGBTQIA members, for them to feel comfortable. Different people facilitate those support groups. And then we have Kids Club, which is pretty much like a childcare service while families are doing getting advocacy support or in support groups. So that's what we have for those individuals. And then separately, we have initiatives that we provide, like coaching boys into men, which is, for an example, we have men go into high schools and sit with young men after sports practice and talk with them about healthy relationship discourse, kind of not supporting trash locker room talk or sharing photos, things like that. Just trying to encourage young men to grow up with the respect of women and with each other and of other men as well.
Do you have experience with that? Do you know what happens when someone comes into an emergency room and reports something?
So if it's through emergency room, I think by law, the doctors have to report abuse if they suspect it. If they come into our center, it's completely confidential and it is up to the survivor to move forward with our services. If it's brought to the police, and there's a police report made though, that is by law, we have to have one of our advocates call and kind of follow up with a survivor so that they feel supported and know how to kind of navigate that system, because there is follow-up after police reports. So that's what happens. I don't know if that helped answer the question or not.
No, I understand. I just my passion in the future, right, is like how do you help people ask for help?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
When you don't know what's gonna happen, when you don't know if it's gonna make it worse.
It's more so letting the survivor know that there are resources available in the community and then providing them with the resources and letting them know that when they're ready, if they're ever ready to reach out to those resources, that way, you know, like people have more time to process and like they know that there's help out there. I think that's one way to get people to get help for themselves without pushing them to get it. And which is really hard because especially when it's our loved ones, we don't want to see them suffer. I will say that abuse is cyclical. We see that all the time. And it's really hard to break out of that cycle. And it's really hard to, you know, like accept that you're someone who is a victim, is a survivor. But that's why we're here. And when that individual's ready, we're here to assist them. And it's always so hard to accept that and call for help. On average, it takes a survivor at least 7 attempts to finally pick up that phone and ask for help. Yeah. Okay. So now we are going to talk about donations. And this is important because none of our work is feasible without donations. We rely specifically on grants and community support. And it's just what nonprofit is. And so we're really grateful for all the community support that we get and that we continue to get. Next slide. Okay, so listed here are where your funds go once you donate. It's not restricted to this amount. We're happy to have folks donate $1, $5. Every single penny makes a huge difference. For instance, listed here, if someone were to donate $250, that would help us secure a survivor with a restraining order, which is often what we do at our center. We help folks file temporary restraining orders and even peaceful contacts. So all this to say is that donations from the community really, really do make a difference, and they really do go back to the work that we do to help survivors. And the next slide. Okay, so we have 2 events coming up, and we would love everybody's support, whether it's through sponsorships, volunteering, or even to donate. We have our winter open house event, and that will be held on December 14th this year. And what that is a holiday celebration. It's restricted specifically for clients, their families, and their children. And so we have games, food, Mr. and Mrs. Claus. It's essentially like a fair, and we hold it at the end of our parking lot and also inside our facility on a Saturday. And it's just a joyous event, especially during difficult times. So we try to make it as fun as possible. It's not a fundraiser. It's just a way to give back to our clients. And so we do look for sponsors to help us put the event together. If anyone's interested, I do have resources here on how to contact us and how to let us know that you're interested in sponsoring. The next event is Girls Got the Blues. That is a fundraiser. And it's a community fundraiser. So it essentially raises funds and raises advocacy and raises awareness. It's personally my favorite event at Nextdoor because it is a jazz concert. Our singer is Laura Price. She flies from Texas with her crew, who fly from other parts of the country. And it's just a joyous yet very serious matter. We tried to combine the two so that people, while they're having a good time, they're also learning, they're educating themselves about domestic violence and letting other folks know about us. And so we do look for sponsorships at that event, for that event to be held. Last year we raised $45,000, which is pretty good because historically this fundraiser raised $10,000. Yeah, so we're pretty excited to see what's to come. And if anybody is interested in sponsoring, we would love that.
I also wanted to mention about the winter open house. If you guys are interested in volunteering for that, you can go to our website and it'll show you how to sign up to volunteer. If you guys want to volunteer as a group and host an activity, that's also an option, and we would really encourage that too.
Next slide. Okay, so we accept all kinds of donations, but all donations must be brand new, unused, and unexpired because we want the best quality of goods for our survivors. Sometimes we get expired items, although we appreciate the donations, we can't give those items to our survivors. So our current needs are food donations and hygiene supplies. We used to accept miniature, like travel size hygiene items, but we found over the years that it's more beneficial for clients to have full-size hygiene items at our facility that they can come and essentially shop around. It's free for them, but it's all shampoo, soap, deodorant, all the good stuff. In terms of food, we're so super, super excited because we now have a freezer. So we can accept frozen goods, and then those goods are going to go right back to our survivors. They're able to come in and grab the meals out of the freezer as much as they want. And then we also accept non-perishable items. Canned goods are always beneficial for our survivors. If anyone's ever interested in donating, the QR code and the link is right there. And it's also on our website. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about volunteering because that's my passion here. So we have two different types of volunteers with us at Nextdoor. We have what's called direct service volunteering, which is requires a little bit more training. It requires a 40-hour training in order to legally by the state of California, in order to interact with survivors of domestic violence, someone must undergo a 40-hour training, which talks about a myriad of issues, talks about children impact, it talks about the impact on immigrant survivors, it talks about a bunch of different topics, but it allows you to do all these different positions, which is like crisis intervention, acting as our front desk, or maybe helping us with our crisis hotline calls. And again, you're trained on how to do so. Legal support, supporting survivors in court, educating them on court processes, or maybe co-facilitating a peaceful contact workshop, which is mandated by the courts as a stipulation of abusers having custody rights granted again, or restraining orders dropped. There's also housing support. Our housing department could always use the support because we know housing insecurity is a serious issue in the Bay Area, but we need help with filling out housing assessments as well as finding out resources in the community. And then lastly, it's Kids Club co-facilitation. So of course, a background check is needed for that, and some other things, mandated reporter training is needed for Kids Club because you're dealing with people's children. But it's a nurturing environment for kids to be there while their parents attend our healing services. So that's direct service volunteering. But then there's indirect service volunteering, which helps us increase our capacity as an organization and is just as equally important. Donation support and organizing that, because like Raisa said, we are regularly getting donations every single day. And I need volunteers to help us organize and maintain our pantry upstairs and downstairs. So that's always a need. Food meal pickups. We have, like she said, a deep freezer, so we can now take frozen meals, which is awesome. And then we also have a food pantry downstairs with preservable items and canned goods and stuff, and that goes really quick as well. And so if one of our volunteers could go do weekly food pickups for us, bring them to our center, go to the food bank, drop it off at our shelter, things like that is always a need. Prevention and outreach. I'm over outreach and I'm trying to champion this thing called the Ambassadors Program, which is where volunteers who love to go out and speak to community members would do what we're doing here and talk about DV, but then also educate the community on our services and spread our reach to places that we might not be able to be right now. So, and then lastly is event support. So I handed you guys all one of those pamphlets, but about winter open house, but we could use volunteer support with setting up, with facilitating the actual event, doing an activity if you guys are open to doing a group activity. And Raisa is leading that, and she's been doing an amazing job with it too. So we're super excited about winter open house. Next slide. So if you're interested in volunteering with us, please head to our website. It's pretty self-explanatory and visitor friendly. It says volunteer now or interested in volunteering. You click on it and you fill out one of our interest forms, which there's a link to it right there, and it'll come straight to me. So, and I'm pretty responsive. You'll hear it within a week. So yeah, and that's our website. And then lastly, just want to list some resources. There are 5 domestic violence agencies in Santa Clara County. We're called the DVAC, Domestic Violence Advocacy Consortium. And that includes AKI, Asian Americans for Community Involvement, MATRI, Community Solutions, YWCA, and Nextdoor Solutions. That's us. And so the list of cumulative services from us are healthcare, healthcare service providing, 24/7 crisis hotlines, emergency sheltering, case management, financial assistance, peer counseling, sheltering. And they mentioned it beginning, but we are the only standalone domestic violence agency, meaning that our other sister agencies provide other services. So we're the only one that just provides services to survivors of domestic violence. Next, please. Oh, and then that's it. So if you guys would reach out to us, if you have any questions, you can reach out to either Raisa or myself. We would be happy to answer any questions for you guys and get you guys involved.
So Nextdoor it's been totally San Jose or stuff. It, it's not like throughout.
No, we just serve Santa Clara County. And that's because, like oftentimes survivors don't have a means of transportation. And if this situation is very, very dire, like they may have a longer commute to get to us. So we try to just serve Santa Clara County alone.
Well, I find it interesting that in 71 you started, and um, I, I I would think that it be in more places.
Every year, there was cuts to our budget, to what the government likes to give to domestic violence, organizations. And so if that was the case, we would totally have probably like 7 different organizations, like, or sites all around. But as of yet, we're still fighting for consistent funding from the government to realize that this is a prevalent issue and it needs consistent funding from the government. So that's something that we also agree to. We wish we had more centers and we wish we had more support from the government.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate your time.